You are going to love this vegan quiche. It's made with a flaky short crust and a filling with tofu and mung beans that packs plenty of protein and just the right texture. So like I mentioned with this recipe, you are gonna need 1/3 cup of yellow mung beans. Make sure they're yellow, the green ones won't work. And you're gonna wanna pre-soak them for at least 3 hours, but I usually just do it overnight. Make sure you add plenty of water to these mung beans because they will soak up quite a lot and they'll expand. So when you're ready to make the recipe, the first thing we're gonna start on is the crust. We're gonna mix up 1 1/3 cups of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we are gonna take 1/2 cup of cold vegan butter chunks and just cut them in with a fork until you have a nice crumbly mixture. This pâte brisée is usually made with your fingers, but vegan butter does melt a little bit faster than traditional butter, so I'm using a fork for as long as possible with this one. Next, we're just gonna add 1 tablespoon of cold water at a time until it starts to hold together. So typically I need about 3 tablespoons of water to get there, and then you can just get your hands in there and start to press it together, but don't overmix it. Once it's ready, you're just gonna shape it into a ball, then flatten it into a disc and wrap it in some plastic wrap so that it doesn't dry out when we put it in the fridge to chill for 30 minutes. All right, once the dough has chilled, we're gonna roll it out on a floured surface. You wanna try to roll it as evenly as possible, but we're going for about 1/8 inch thick. Next, we're gonna put it in the pan, so I'm gonna peel it up off the counter first. And then I'm gonna slide a 9-inch tart pan into place and lay the crust on top. Then we're just gonna fold that crust right into the edges. Just be careful not to break it. And then I'm just gonna press around the top to trim off that extra crust. And finally, I'm gonna poke some holes in the bottom with a fork so that air can get through when it's baking. And this is just gonna go back in the fridge for another 30 minutes. By the way, if you wanna make this gluten-free, you can totally swap the all-purpose flour for Bob's 1-to-1 gluten-free flour mixture. I have tested that one. The only thing is you're not gonna be able to roll it out. So what you're gonna wanna do is press it into the pan with your fingers instead. Also, when it comes to baking, you're gonna wanna reduce the baking time by about 10 minutes, but other than that, everything's pretty much the same and it turns out pretty well. So before your crust finishes chilling, you're gonna want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we're gonna prep the crust to bake it before we put it in the oven. So I'm just putting it on a baking tray here, and then I'm spraying a piece of aluminum foil with oil. Then we're gonna cover the crust with the foil, oil side down, and then you're gonna add some pie weights to keep the crust from lifting as it bakes. If you don't have pie weights, you could also use dry rice or dry beans, just something to hold it down. And this is gonna go in the oven for 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, we are gonna take off the foil and the pie weights and bake it for another 5 minutes or so, just until it starts to turn golden brown. And then we'll just set that on a wire rack to cool while we make everything else. While the crust is baking, you can also start chopping up your veggies. So we're gonna need 1/2 cup of chopped onion, 2 cloves of minced garlic. We're gonna need 3 ounces of mushrooms. I am using a king oyster mushroom and I am slicing and quartering it here, but you can really use any kind of mushrooms that you want. And I also have 1/2 cup of grape tomatoes that I am going to slice them in half. Oh, and if you want, you can also add some fresh herbs. I'm just taking some basil leaves and chopping those up. All right, so our filling is pretty easy. We're just adding everything to a blender and blending it up. So we've got 1/2 14-ounce package of extra firm tofu. We've got those soaked yellow mung beans, 3/4 cup of almond milk, 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric, and 1/2 teaspoon each of salt, black pepper, and black salt. The black salt is what's gonna give this filling that sulfurous, eggy taste, so you can either use it or leave it out depending on what you prefer. And this is gonna blend up pretty quickly. It shouldn't take more than 2 to 3 minutes depending on your blender. Now I'm just gonna soften some of my veggies. So I'm gonna heat some olive oil in a skillet over medium heat, and I'm just cooking up my onions until they're just softened, so about 5 minutes. And then I'm gonna add in the mushrooms and garlic and just cook those until the moisture from the mushrooms has evaporated. All right, next we're gonna mix up the filling. So we're gonna take that filling from the blender and put it in a bowl. And then I'm going to fold in the onions and mushrooms and 3/4 of a cup of shredded vegan cheese. I am using my homemade vegan Gruyere. I will link the recipe and the video for that in the description in case you wanna make it, but you could also just use store-bought vegan cheese. Now we're just gonna pour that right into the crust and spread it around with our little spatula. And then you could top it off with some basil leaves and those grape tomatoes. And we're gonna pop this back in the oven for 45 minutes or until your filling is totally set. And that's it. This is really such a great recipe to make for the holidays or like any special occasion. It's just so good. It's also Omni approved. My friends who are not vegan also love it. And you can of course make it your own. Add any vegetables you want. Bell peppers, zucchini, asparagus would all be great. Well, that is all for this one, but if you want more vegan breakfast recipes, I will link some at the end of this video for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.